have KPA, Eldoret Container Terminal, that is Kenya Ports Authority. We have also Kenya Ports Authority stevedoring services. KPA, development of bats, number 11 to 14. Sh1billion Sugar, also that will be or is seeking to be privatized by the government. We have Sony Sugar, we have Nzoia Sugar, we have Cabernet Hotel, we have Kenya Meats Commission, we have New KCC, also we have Qual, we have East Africa Portland Cement. This is illustrated there by the star. East Africa Portland Cement, we have shares there by NSSF, 27%, and the government of Kenya also owning their 25% as well. ICDC, 72.6%, that is for Qual there. New KCC, 100%. Kenya Meat Commission going up there, also 100%. Cabernet Hotel, KTDC, 98.2%. Nzoia Sugar, you have all the tabulation there. You can pick up the star to read all the details about this privatization spree that the government has embarked on. Will it make any discernible difference? Horrible Kirwa thinks this should not be the way. We shall try and streamline our corporate governance of these institutions before we privatize. And even as we're thinking about privatization, what about the involvement of other stakeholders like Parliament and the public participation? Or is this the full domain of the executive to actually call for the privatization without any consultation? And also top on that is the privatization of universities, which the unions also are really against, that is from the academia. And we just want to continue with this conversation with you, Wilson Sosion, now gravitating towards a privatization, as we had promised when we circle back.
Privatization of universities, I don't think has been within serious conversations and decisions within government circle. When we developed the education charter in Kenya Kwanza, universities remained fundamentally critical government installations that should remain public, and the only recommendation is how to make them work and how to reorganize the financing and reopen universities to more Kenyans. You see, when you talk of 100% transition to secondary, there should be 100% transition to higher learning institutions, that is TVET, mid-level colleges and universities. Kenyan public universities cannot be privatized. At least I've not seen any government document within the Ministry of Education, at least not in the Education Charter. That was not part of our discussion, and I think that is a stray discussion. And if anybody within government or outside government has such a thinking, that is a misplaced thinking, at least not the position of the president as far as I know as of now, not the position of government.
So what are the unions stoutly against? Is it just hot air?
That's hot air. That's hot air. It's imagination of a few other people. There are three things that cannot be privatized in any country, and is a mark of independence of a country. You cannot privatize learning institutions and education, because education is a fundamental right that the public government must provide. But of course, you cannot stop private individuals from establishing their own private institutions. That's okay. But public cannot be handed over to private actors. Number two, you cannot privatize health. Health is an essential social service. So two social services, and that of course listed in UN as fundamental and state must provide, education and health. So really, it's inconceivable for anybody within government and to try and canvas and dream of some universities being privatized. We saw what was happening at KU, annexation of land by the previous administration, annexation of land for other experiences, and trying to privatize even a facility that is within KU. We saw the humiliation and sacking of the Vice Chancellor and the dismissal of the University Council, which President William Ruto has normalized by reinstating the leadership of the university and reverting the land back to the universities. This is what we need. protection of public assets, particularly in education and universities. These are critical entities, and they can never be privatized, at least for now. That is an idea that is not discussed. It's not in the charter. It doesn't exist, and it should remain as such. So the protest from the university unions was just but a provocation. And I think any further discussion of this item will cause a lot of provocation, not only locally but internationally. As a continent and even as a global community, we cannot privatize public universities
with what
and
intends.
Public schools.
I'm afraid.
Yeah, because what it means is that government is running away from the responsibility of providing education, which is a fundamental human right, and that would be wrong. So really, even here in Kenya, can you tell us that University of Nairobi will be privatized? Egerton University will be privatized? It is in financial problems because of the reforms, these reforms you are talking about, that were undertaken by ministers who are insensitive. The end of Module 2, self-sponsored programs, which is a major component of income earning of all universities everywhere in the world. Universities earn money through programs by admitting students who pay fees, and we have done very well here in Kenya through Module 2. But a minister who could not reason with anybody, a minister who was Mr. Right, came and damaged the transition to universities and reduced through KCSE. That's Fred Matiang'i, because he had war with Professor Mbithi of the University of Nairobi, and he wanted to stifle SSP just to frustrate an individual. And that is why we are in this mess across all these universities. And the only way to revive universities is what Ezekiel Machogu has been doing at the ministry. That then let us treat these KCSE exams properly, moderate them properly within international framework, and facilitate transition. Exams are supposed to facilitate transition. And I'm happy with the statement he has made that at least 30% of the candidature in KCSE should be able to meet minimum requirements to be admitted to universities. Once that is done, all our universities will admit very many students. They'll have fee-paying students, they'll have resources, and they'll be able to undertake their work of research, teaching, and community development. That is what we need. But the route of privatizing, and even the wider program of privatizing public assets, must be handled very carefully. Because you know this animal called state capture. Because you are told Kenya Railways has been bought by a South African company. But when you check that South African company and those individuals, they are crooks here in Kenya.
Thank you.
And you're told Kenya Ports Authority. And we saw the other day, it has been taken over by some strange fellows in Dubai. Right. When you check, it is individuals who are here in Kenya. We must be very careful with this privatization, because it is some few crooks in this country who actually could be annexing these great public assets for their own good. So privatization of public institutions in general must be above board.
Above board, yes.
Above board.
Okay, above board is what we want actually to scratch on and try and reveal how it should be done. The president pronounced about this privatization. We've not had any document regarding it, or also any discussions in Parliament. What is the proper way to do it?
The BAL, just before the break, you asked some very important questions. One was, we're talking of STEM, but we have graduates of IT and engineering.
And the labor absorption, yes.
Right, the labor absorption. For me, the education problem, what disturbs me most was the realization that on average, we have less than 20% of our youth, of our children, passing exams. Less than 20. Particularly in the last exam, it turned out to be 19.8 something percent passing. What does that mean? It means 80% have failed. And I understand from the educationalists, this has been the trend, I think, since 2016. We should, as a country, be concerned about that. And when they say 20% pass, in mathematics, that's C+, for those to qualify to go to the university. For mathematics, it's only 35%. So it's a very weak pass. As a former teacher, lecturer, 35% is not a good mark. So clearly something needs to be done to change the narrative. For the developed world, you have 60% of their youth qualifying to go to the university. True. What can we do? So if the Honorable CS talks of increasing to 30%, that's a good start. But we need to be thinking of maybe 50% or 40%, certainly not 20%. But it also brings...
So increasing to 30 to 60%, what does it really mean? That the exams, they're not as tight?
I think...
Or what does essentially that mean?
I think many explanations have been given.
In fact, let me not interfere with this.
Let me just... No. Let him finish first.
The requirement, the BAL, to moderate the exams is normal practice. I must admit I've not vested myself too much with the exams, but either what it means is that we are training half-baked candidates, or our exam system is defective. One of the two has got to be addressed.
That's the question,
But we must bring it up beyond the 20% that it is. In terms of why the employability of the labor market that we train, I dare ask, there's been a lot of talk between university, industry, collaboration. How much of it is happening? To what extent does the private sector and industry have input into our curricula? I mean, if universities are going to be just ivory towers on their own, then you end up into the problems that we have. In the more advanced jurisdictions, universities work very closely with industries. In fact, some of the universities have their own industries where research is done. Correct. They not only make money from paying students, but even from conducting research and inventing and having patents and all that kind of thing, so that you generate revenue. And maybe this is one area where we have not sufficiently utilized diaspora. So the aspect of linkages between academia and private sector and corporates and industry, even the public sector as well, a lot more needs to be done. I know there have been attempts for internships and mentorships. It needs to be deepened more. Maybe lastly, in terms of education reform, when we had a conversation towards the end of last year with diasporas, what would you need to do if you are to change the Kenya education system? The rallying call across board was value systems. Some were saying even the old system that some of us went through, the 7-4-3 system, was not problematic. The 8-4 system may not be that bad. But what is lacking in all this, including the CBC, value-based systems? How do we instill values? Why do we have architects or structural engineers who build houses that collapse? Shortcuts. So value system, for me, is the underlying fact. Whether it's technical training, STEM, and all, value system must be key. And that's an area we need to look at.
And that's what I was posing here regarding the humanities, sciences as well.
Right.
Yeah, where you can actually, the value-based system being infused. Finally,
in terms of privatizing universities, I think I would have a hesitation in that regard. In terms of privatization as a principle is not bad. Actually, there hasn't been a lot of activity at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. So having a bit of initial public offerings there is not bad. But it's got to be done within a framework with a good purpose. I often tell people that if you want to look at how not to privatize, look at how Zambia Telecom, Celtel was privatized, how Telecom Kenya was privatized. That's how not to privatize. But it's got to be done above board. Again, the value system, the vested interest must be bind. It must be for a common good, and it must be done above board. And the professionals who, if they're given a free hand, could do fair justice in terms of privatizing.
I think also we can learn from Telecom here in the country as well. A huge chunk of
absolutely.
Here, 60% of it now.
Actually, in terms of telecom, electricity, there's talk. We must also distinguish between privatization and liberalization. I think what has helped the telecom sector in Kenya is not so much privatization of telecom. It was the opening up the field to competitors like Safaricom.
Right.
And same can be done for electricity.
Okay. All right, since we're shuffling between now academia and the privatization that we're talking about, the issue of also value-based system as well. Also, my director is reminding me, how then do we as a country infuse this value-based system, yet also on the other hand, we have such a corrupt society. It is so backed into our system that it's become a norm way of living here. Let me just hear from Kiro. We'll come to Socio.
You know,
going
I think,
sequentially.
the foundation of this country was laid on the wrong footing because we spent a lot of time talking about the rallying call of the three issues we needed to address: poverty, ignorance, and disease. We did not go for values. We never spent time to inculcate the need for nationalhood, which Nyerere did in Tanzania. It was part of a school curriculum that he spent a lot of time inculcating the values in various schools. And he himself acted as an exemplary leader. I remember a certain period, it is said he called his bank manager to request to restructure his loan for a house he had bought privately because he had just paid school fees for the children. In Kenya, if a president was to call the bank for restructuring of the loan, would be something that has not been heard unless it is a huge amount of money that is required. So it is doable. What we need to do is to start from the beginning. There are those of us who natural attrition process will get rid of with our bad manners. But I'm sure if we started a program from primary school all the way to universities that is talking about values that we talk about in chapter 6, and we allow them to be seen to pervade the atmosphere of leadership, and for leaders also to be held on account on the basis of those values. That is the day Kenya will now be recovering and will be on the road to success. Now, back to the issue of privatization. Privatization naturally will begin by a cabinet memo where the cabinet will discuss and make certain recommendations. Upon agreeing, they will make reference to parliament. Perhaps today, now it will be the two houses. And now that is where ventilation will be done. And in the process, public participation, given as a requirement in the Constitution, should be put in place. And there must be clarity of thought and purpose. Is it privatization or divestiture? Because you see, you can own 100% of an institution, but you can say, let us divest so that we get some resources to run it and improve it. But must you privatize when it is almost on its deathbed? And the answer is no. What you should do is to see how those institutions can be made to turn around. And once there is effective management, now you can sell. It's like you're starving a cow for 3 days, then you sell it for 30,000. A cow that if it is properly fed, within a week, it will go back to almost 100,000 or 150,000. So my recommendation is that let's talk of divestiture so that other Kenyans can also have. Because really, how can you privatize now when the country does not have money? If it is divestiture for government to raise some revenue, that's okay. But divesting to who? Is it just going to be bought by one or two individuals? You see, like the ones of Cabernet Hotel and many others. There is the Mount Elgon one, there is the Golf Hotel in Kakamega. Is somebody trying to buy and make it a chain of hotels and just need a bit of painting, a bit of refurbishing, and it becomes an outfit? The way Kenatco was sold. Somebody ran down Kenatco and bought it for a song. And that is how people made some of the wealth in this nation. So we are seeing it coming, and that is my main concern. Let the public be involved. Let Parliament be involved. At least Parliament will have one or two voices who will tell us what is the truth about this divestiture or privatization.
Brett, we'll question also the rhyme and reason of privatizing some of these farms that we think have been doing very well. If you ask me, Kenjan, I think, just recently they posted their profit readings, and it's been rising exponentially, paying at least over 30 billion dividends to their shareholders. If I may remember very well, my maths is not very correct on that, but I think that's the ballpark figure. So we'll question some of these institutions that are being privatized. Why are they being privatized and yet they're standing on solid ground? If at all, maybe the institutions that have been listed here, and we see they're a bit struggling, trying to keep afloat, that will give the reason for them being privatized. But why would you privatize some of these institutions that are doing well? Sosion?
Yeah, before I talk about that, Dibal, I needed an intervention of a critical.
Oh yeah, I didn't give you a chance, sure.
With Sh1billion. And this also has got to do with values. You cannot talk about values when everything has to do with governance and lack of following of laws. You see, there is a maxim that we practice at what we call mangisi, mangidu. So people copy. So the entire problem of Kenya is not even values. It is governance. It is the leadership. It's how we behave and how we carry ourselves. But let me come back to the issue of examinations. And in fact, Kenyan education outcomes is one of the strongest in the world. But we pleasure a lot from destroying children. Mm-hmm. The media would like to see reporting of so many cheatings and how many students have failed. When there were a paltry 1,000 A's, Kenyans are condemning that thing. These are too many. But we are forgetting that in 2015, we had about 3,000 A's when the candidature was at 500,000. In fact, what Ezekiel Machogu is talking about of 30% is very low. It should be at 60%. What is the purpose of exams? I think we have formalized it as Kenya that exams, you must fail students. Exams are supposed to facilitate transition, give students the commensurate scores that they need, that they deserve. So the issue of moderation, which he has talked about, is professional. You must moderate grades. You must moderate raw marks and assign grades. And when you assign grades, assign reasonable grades. And that is why I said in 2015, a minister came in and messed up this moderation and removed moderation completely. Amina Mohammed tried to bring it back. That wasn't successful, and you can see Machogu has brought it, and it's a bit of reaction. It's only 173,000. If we are talking about 800,000 of our own children in this country who are an investment, and you are killing 600,000, surely, in terms of values and value systems and governance, is that what a country should do? Do we exist to destroy our own children, then politic around as if nothing has happened? I think it's time the Minister of Education and Machogu should now, for it to work, bring in experts in measurement and evaluation, and let us discuss how to deal with exams and how to manage this transition, and so that there's no cheating, and allow more students to transit. Once that is done, universities will have sufficient students, technical institutions, and we should be able to get through with 100% of training all our citizens to be useful. We cannot kill in every... Can you look at it cumulatively? In 10 years, if you are destroying 80% of our students, what will you have? What type of population will you have after 10 years? What values do you have in terms of governance in this country? So the problem is not even values. Let me tell you about today at 8 o'clock, all children in this country will sing the national anthem. They will sing the national anthem. And at the end of these exams, somebody, an individual or individuals at the exam council, because they manage or at the ministry, will destroy their grades. Is that the right way to go? And I think in this country, we have to transform governance. We want an accountable government, and a government that we can see through what it means for the citizens of this country for the next 10 years. So don't talk about bringing values to the education system when we are promoting dishonesty and bad governance. And of course, if you go to a country like Malaysia, things to do with corruption. You know, we promote corruption in this country so much. And in fact, when you're talking about this privatization, it's another class and another chapter of corruption. People handling how to annex certain investments of this country. Let's look at KQ, for example. KQ, compared with Ethiopian Airlines. Ethiopian Airlines is making profit. KQ is making losses. But when you look at KQ, what is killing it? It is procurement within KQ. This subsidy money that is pumped to KQ does not reach KQ. It is diverted to individuals. Is that values that is rooted in Kenyans or values of corruption? It's corruption habits that are practiced by the top class. And this is where state capture comes in. Once we destroy state capture, and the moment you are elected as a president or a leader in this country, you are above anything called corruption, and we promote good governance, then we'll have automatic good values being regenerated. This is a rich country. Do we really need to have KQ being in the red all the time and being bailed out when it ought to be making profit? It ought to be the richest airlines it has. Ethiopia is doing it.
Thank you.
There is something to do with governance. It is now time, and I would say even as teachers, let us not talk about integrating values. We already have values when we are not dealing with matters, governance, and corruption in this country, and compliance with the laws. Of course, we are making laws in parliament. Kenya is a country that is known to make very good laws, and the laws are never enforced.
And even talking of values, I think...
Just a little clarification, Debal, in terms of value systems. Our Article 10 of the Constitution brings about 17 principal values and principles of governance. So, and some of the things Honorable Sosion is talking about are very much captured in that regard: integrity, honesty, transparency, accountability, corruption-free, and so on and so forth. So, yes, value system to some people, when we're using it in that broadest sense to cover what are all the good habits that you expect. Interestingly, all these value systems go also with spiritualism and religion, whether it's Islam or Hinduism or Hindu or Christianity, value systems in the broad sense. I just wanted to bring that clarification. But I think what we are basically saying is that can we have good manners where people respect the rule of law, where justice prevails, and so on and so forth.
Right. I wanted just to ask the broader question of, because since we are talking about the framework, I know also there's a privatization bill that is on right now, and I think that will be broached by Parliament. If these particular companies have been, listed here as some of the targets that should be taken to the private sector, what will be, because I can hear also most of you saying, no, that is not really the way to go. The public participation should also be fostered into this particular bill. I think they will be given a chance as well. But I just wanted to hear in terms of steamrolling this bill. Should we go full steam ahead and steamroll it, see the light of day, while we here are also feeling that, no, this is not the right time to actually privatize some of his farms? You mentioned KQ. KQ also is just about to, I think in the next few days we'll be hearing another profit warning from KQ. And the government has been very categorical. By the end of this year, December, we're not bailing out KQ anymore. So that Mayday call from KQ should be over by December. So it should be finding its way, or now it can keep itself afloat.
For me, I think we must be clear on what are the main goals and objectives. I think, like Honorable Kirwa was saying, there are certain struggling corporations. Maybe the purpose to privatize or to disinvest is to bring them back to life. Maybe bring better management to them or get in some more investment into them. But there are also those that maybe you just there is divestiture from them just because you want to raise capital to the exchequer, resources to the exchequer. So we must be very clear on why we're doing privatization. But then again, once it's done, of course, The cabinet memo obviously would indicate the purposes, the how, the which, the to whom, and for me, the bulk of them should be offloaded at the Securities Exchange so that they are bought not by individuals, but preferably by the public. So we must be, the divestiture can be done, but yes, there should be better ways. But if it's in terms of raising resources, we must ask ourselves, what other ways can we raise resources? Allow me to compliment the chair, Madam Lydia Haika of the Diaspora Affairs and Migrant Workers Committee of Parliament that hosted us last week in Mombasa. One of the questions the MPs raised, the honorable MPs raised, was, why do we have to keep going to the Bretton Woods to borrow? Yet we know that the bigger donor now, the diasporas are bringing double all the money we get from our partners. To give the Kibaki administration credit, 93% of our budget was locally funded then. What need we do to get back to that stage? Obviously, if we laid avenues, if it's raising money, there are several ways of raising money. The remittances that come in, repeatedly we've been told it's only 5%. So there's a whole lot more that can be brought in. As we are talking, one of our leading members in New Jersey has a proposal that's anchored upon what Abraham Lincoln did in the 1862 to be precise. Food security bond, a $10 billion effort to vanquish hunger. Some of these are proposals that we probably need to look at and take to the next stage, because obviously a hungry nation is an angry nation. We need food security. I was watching the outcomes of President of Zimbabwe from the Food Security Summit in Senegal, where he says what they've been able to do the past 1 or 2 years, being able to produce fertilizer locally, being able to provide, to be food sufficient in terms of maize, in terms of wheat, to the extent that they're hoping they can export. If what he was saying was true, I have no reason to doubt, then that's really the way to go. How would local content and local production, how do we promote that? And there are ways of getting Kenya's own resources. Obviously, we have to be very innovative and transparent to attract more investment. For now, of course, the exchange rate is a disincentive. You tell a diasporian to bring in dollars, 120 shillings, and then when they make profit, they want to take it out, it goes to 130 shillings per dollar. So one of the proposals which we're making as Kenya Diaspora Alliance to government is consider giving a markup to the diasporas. Just tell them you can even bring your dollars for 122 shillings, a little markup beyond the market rate. Then we'll kind of take away this problem of shortage of hard currency, but as well get us more money into the economy. Lastly, I must mention I'm so happy. I know government is talking of trillion shillings. The diasporas are already playing in the league of bringing 500 billion. So they're already in the trillion league. In fact, our African diaspora historical are telling us, why are you talking of just 1 trillion shillings? While we are a $1.2 trillion spending capacity, we could start playing in that league. So let's tap into that. There's that gold mine, which we could tap.
But the biggest question has been as well, just to latch on the diaspora and the remittances as well, that, yeah, we can be playing in that particular league, but that is purely a consumptive sort of remittance that we have. It's fragmented, so it does not really, we have money will circulate in the economy, but in terms of tangible outcome from that particular remittances, it's hard to come by.
You're absolutely right, Debal. But what better way is it than meeting the basic needs? If we can supply water, we can have enough food, shelter, education, and health, the basics are taken care of. But I fully agree with you. One of our targets is how do we increase money going into hard savings and investment?
Indeed. All right. Horwa Kirwa?
Well, if I was to say something about the diaspora, I think it's also for the government to be very innovative. And let's take, for example, even housing scheme. Almost in every county, let's say we were to have serious housing scheme, that members of the diaspora can build their houses while they are abroad. because many of them send their money to the relatives,
Sure.
and some of the relatives are not as honest as they should. But if there is a very credible scheme by government, let's say in almost every county, and the diaspora can give us that information, then you can do housing, so that when somebody every month can be remitting that money and seeing progress of the housing estate that is building. The second issue is what you asked earlier, the issue of the requisite skills meeting the requirements of the market.
Indeed.
I think we just need to fine-tune a policy where the money that we take to devolution, I see many buildings coming up in various constituencies and throughout the country, and county projects. What we need to do is to say somebody who is supposed to be a mason, a carpenter, or whatever grade, dealing with certain level of structures, must have the necessary training and certification for purposes of ensuring that those, we don't push away those who are already in the trade and they know how to do it without the certificates. But in future, progressively, we can ensure that for me to be a mason, for me to be a carpenter in a certain building, I must have the requisite skill and certification to prove that I'm doing what I know.
But I think on that particular idea,
Yes,
we had an initiative. I don't know if it was an initiative or it was just an intent from the Kenya National Qualifications Authority. I think this is a subject that has been broached, that yes, we have the artisans here who are well versed.
Yeah.
They're actually very, very good, but they don't have, you know, the
Papers.
commensurate papers actually to accompany that.
Yeah.
So how then do you sort of come up with a way of certifying them? It's not,
Prior learning.
yeah.
You're calling it?
Prior learning.
Prior learning,
Yeah.
prior learning,
yeah.
prior learning.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so you're calling it prior learning.
Yeah, prior learning.
Because you have the experience.
Yeah.
Over the years you've been actually doing as an artisan. You have the experience. You're well versed with what you're doing, but you don't have the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how then do you try and sanitize that area with the large constituents of the Joakalis who are very good yet they don't have the papers?
The question is first to have a policy framework, and the policy framework will provide that you need to have this kind of certificate for you to be accepted. And those who don't have certificates can be taken through and be given effective certification measuring to their level of skills through these different institutions. It is just a question of fine-tuning so that those who are already in the trade, you are able to absorb them by giving them certificates, and those who are learning through TVETs will now get to the market with the necessary grades that, yes, I'm coming to the market, what do you have? I have this certificate in plumbing, in masonry, in carpentry, or whichever trade that you are trained in.
So what should
that
be
way,
the practical way and not the theory way, maybe for them that have been in the market?
We combine. In fact, we allow them to run in tandem. And in the natural attrition process, we'll get rid of those who do not have certificates in future. Yeah. If I have the skills, give me certification after testing me through various activities to measure my capacity to be able to get to that particular field. And those who are getting out of the field, we should have the same certificate. And therefore, if you are employing somebody at the level of CDF, a project in a constituency, you must see that they have those certificates so that we do not have so many other people pushing wheelbarrows, and within no time they become fundis, and because they are cheaper, now many of the unscrupulous businessmen or contractors, they will use them, and that's why we have collapse of many buildings.
Right. So soon before you even raise your hand, I wanted to ask very, very important, still on the labor scale.
Yeah. Because
we've had lecturers also complaining on the caliber of students that now they're going to universities. They cannot, first of all, even hold out their thoughts in conversations. Within the groups that sometimes they're put up in, they cannot ask critical questions. They cannot even write very fluently, so to speak, on some of the dissertations that they're putting forth. The labor, I think also the Federation of Kenya Employers had raised this question about the skills match from the graduates from the universities who are really wanting. And I've raised this on this particular forum again and again, that it's a huge cost for the employers. Once these graduates, they come out from university, they have to be retrained again because there is a mismatch between labor market and the skill set that is coming from the university. People were coming from high school. And I think maybe this is an advent of a social media. You know, simple composition they cannot actually do. It's really wanting, they have to be even corrected grammatically. And I saw someone in the social media, one of the lecturers, really complaining. Something has to be addressed on that particular forum where students coming from high school, they don't have this.
You know, that points to what you call proficiency and competencies. Proficiency and competencies to learn or to undertake a course, and of course, proficiency to work. Proficiency to work depends on the quality of training, and to undertake a training is a matter of qualifications. So that goes to addressing the whole issue of the curriculum. How do we conduct teaching? How do we frame our programs so that our students can undertake further training comprehensively? And how do we mount our trainings? Now, the link of the outcomes, the skills, and the mismatch with the market has got something to do with the type of training that really we give them. And if you look at the agenda that we have in Kenya Kwanza and what the Presidential Working Party is working on, even on looking at those who already have skills and are not certificated, it's one item that is good news that is going to be conducted. They will be certificated so that they are able to work. But moving forward, as a country, have we really promoted TVET education and technical education?
Right.
We have not. We have not. When you don't do that, you cannot expect much from a student. And that boils back to what we are doing even at the curriculum that we are teaching at the basic education level, pre-technical education. Where did we take it? So that really we allow learners to get exposed at an early stage. Those who are aligned to technical education, they're able to be proficient and be ready even for training. And that brings me, let's link all these skills even to privatization. Why are we privatizing? We are privatizing to transfer ownership to the citizen. And not only to transfer ownership, to ensure that those enterprises remain profitable and strong enough to employ more citizens. That is the whole sense of privatization. But the question is, what is the skill level of our graduates to own and even run these enterprises? Our education system was designed, the post-colonial, which we are still slaves to up to date. It was designed not to allow our engineers even to own and run industrial enterprises, manufacturing, to shy away from manufacturing. And that is why we have all these problems. So really, we have to address a whole lot of the philosophy of TVET education. And that is why when you look at the whole agenda of the president, and the president has spoken very clearly, very strongly, and the previous administration tried to dive into TVET, and the process of growing TVET was again undermined, and it is what this government is focused on to really, and that is why there's a subcommittee to really focus on TVET, and that is going to address all the skills that is needed. And this definitely will eventually match with the market. It must match with the market, and we must produce skilled workers, skilled citizens, and skilled graduates who can fit very well, not only to work in the industrial sector, but even to own and run. Right now, it cannot. And that brings me the issue of the diaspora.
Yeah, before you go to diaspora, was this a colonial problem?
You see, The
Was it actually
was a
set
colonial.
deliberately by the
If you
colonialists?
look
So
at
that
the education that was designed
yes.
in 2023, in 1923, was to prepare Africans to do vocational education, and it was bastardized at that time. The post-colonial education was designed in such a way that the investments within this country, look at the factories, the industries, who owns them? They're owned by foreigners. And the profits from all these manufacturing sectors
multinationals.
Get out the multinational, get out of the country.
That's what I'm saying.
So
was that very
and
deliberate?
it's not only in Kenya, it's in the entire Africa. It was deliberate. And any country that has attempted to run away from that cocoon by designing its own education system, its own program, has been dealt with from the West, either through World Bank and the rest. Look at 844, for example. 844 was a major takeoff that was going to take Kenya to join the Asian Tigers. But it was frustrated by the World Bank in 1988 through cost-sharing program that led to the collapse even of the 844 idea itself. Look at the Nyayo Pioneer, where Kenya designed to manufacture its own cars. It was frustrated. Look at the brewing industry, the breweries. The Keroge was slapped with taxes, and that alternative beer manufacturing was destroyed because it should not compete with Kenya breweries. Kenya brewery is not owned by Kenyans. It's basically a foreign-owned company.
Yes.
So those assets owners, right from the colonial time, do not want any competition with their factories and with their interests, and that is why you must align the Africans, even through their education, to look differently and to shy away from manufacturing. It's something that we need to deal with now by, of course, looking at TVET and this window of privatization. It allows citizens to own it if it is designed properly, and all the manufacturing farms and investments within the country will be owned by Kenya. That is the grand idea. So it's all about the philosophy of freedom. How do we want to carry this country in terms of even its economic enterprises and ownership of the economy? It should revert to Africans. It should be profitable. It should be able to guarantee employment. You've asked a question. You are producing graduates who are unemployed. How have we aligned our manufacturing sector and our economy? Because when you look at our economy now, we have been a consuming economy, capital-intensive economy. We are building roads, building railways, but we are destroying the production sector.
Thank you.
The production sector must be stimulated to work, and those who work in the production sector are skilled citizens through our education system.
Thank you. So we were looking at, before you just carry on,
Sure.
Dr. Sh1billion, that we have around 75% of the young people who are 35 and below.
Right.
It's a huge constituent.
Right.
And people were saying, this is a very good
Yes.
platform to tap in terms of energy, in terms of,
the youth,
intellectual, the
youth bulge.
The youth bulge is in terms of intellectual acuity. But there is an aspect of having 75% who are under 35, and I know the population experts will call that the quantity population and the quality population.
Yes.
So even from looking at the 75%,
Right.
what is a quality population?
Right. The balance got also to do with, earlier on you were talking about absence of critical thinking. For me, one of the beef I had with the 844, for what I knew about it, it was presented like we training children to cram, being able to memorize and reproduce. So there was the absence of critical thinking. Whether that's true or not is a point of conjecture. But that notwithstanding, yes, critical thinking is key. Of course, these young students and pupils of today, particularly at university level, you're likely to get students who are busy tweeting. When you go to a classroom, you find them, each of them on their smartphones, doing all manner of things. Sometimes maybe not even paying sufficient attention to teachers. Obviously, we must change with the times as well. While some consider it a challenge, I see it as an opportunity to prepare workers of the future. But Dibal, in terms of linking employment or labor with education system, I must say as an academic that we don't only train for labor. I think that's a point we need to appreciate, that not everybody is being trained for employment. You also learn because innovation and research also has got to run in tandem. So usually, even just having knowledge to help solve problems, sometimes they end up solving long-term rather than short-term problems. So let's be clear that not everybody must be trained for the labor market. There is a fraction, but of course, as a country, we must decide, is it 20% or 10% that we are just training for academic, for knowledge deepening and growth, and for research, and for innovation and inventions. So that has got to happen, but we must agree on what fraction. Having said that, I think one major thing that's lacking between industry and academia, and also in our education curriculum, is lack of clear pathways. In a place like the UK, and I know of many Kenyans who, after doing higher national diploma at the time, would go to the UK after 1 year, bridging course, they get a master's. So there is those who want to be in the TVET-like, but want to move into academia and vice versa. We need very clear pathways in terms of migrating from the TVETs, the technicals, to the academic, purely academic, for those who want to move in between. Maybe lastly, if I was to be asked what are the two most critical issues to look at in terms of education reform, for me the first one is we have not discussed, as Honorable Sosion is saying, the TVET sector, technical training, has not gotten the befitting attention. We've talked about education, yes, curriculum reform, and we've tried to reform our technical training. But I really think that we need to spotlight it even much more, because the way of the future, and particularly as we go towards the fourth industrial revolution, the TVET training is going to play not less but more role. So we need more focus on it. And then lastly, deepening industry, academia linkages. That would even help us address the issue of funding, because I often say it's not government with funding, with money. Government just creates the necessary environment and policies.
It's a facilitative role.
That's right, the facilitative role. The corporates have got the money, but they need to know what's the return on investment. So create the environment, let them engage with our universities and research institutions. Some of them wouldn't mind funding, as long as at the end of the day, the products, you save them, for example, having to retrain employees once they employ them, once they leave the universities. So deepening industry, academia linkage is one way to address a whole lot of plethora of problems.
Right. Well, we're due for a station break again. We have Kimeria Kagumba, who is saying here on Twitter that please encourage CBC. The outcome is much better than 844. All grade 12 students will be employable or self-employed, innovative, and will move in a direction they are good at. No more floating students who get under-greased on 844. Just a sentiment there from social media. But, you know, the probing question is, yes, we are now going to CBC, but the facilities, that is the biggest problem. It is not about the classrooms. If you're if you're actually taking music, do you have the facilities, the music instruments, the piano, the saxophone? Because right now it's all kayambas and the percussions that are actually in schools right now. If we're going the CBC way, it is quite expensive actually facilitating these schools. And we're talking about PPP and partnerships right now. I think that's the way to go. So when they go today, moving forward,